The purple sky of Kepler 438b burned with the light of dying ships as commander. Alara watched from the observation deck. Below her, the last evacuation transports struggled to escape the planet's gravity well. Their engines glowed like falling stars against the dark surface of the world she had called home for 30 years. "How much time do we have left?" she asked without turning around. Captain Thorne stepped beside her, his reflection ghost-like in the reinforced glass. 6 hours at most. The Ravager fleet will be in weapons range by then. The Ravagers had swept through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path. 17 star systems had fallen to their hunger in the past 2 months. Number 1 had ever successfully fought them. No world had ever survived their arrival. Their biomechanical ships ate metal and flesh with equal appetite, growing larger with each meal. What about the defense fleet? Alara's voice carried the weight of command, but Thorne could hear the fear underneath. Scattered to the winds. Admiral Corvin managed to save some ships from the Centauri battle, but they're running for their lives now. The Third Fleet exists only in fragments. Through the speakers, desperate voices pleaded for more time. Transport captains reported overloaded cargo holds. Military escorts called for emergency repairs. Children cried for parents who would never leave the planet's surface. The evacuation was a nightmare of panic and desperation. "Commander," Lieutenant Beck approached with a data tablet in his hands. "Long-range sensors are picking up something strange." Alara finally turned from the window. "Define strange, Lieutenant." "There's a ship approaching from the outer system. It's not broadcasting any identification codes, and its design doesn't match anything in our databases." Thorne frowned. "Could it be a Ravager scout?" "No, sir. The energy signature is completely different." "And, Commander?" Beck's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's heading straight for the Ravager fleet." The 3 officers looked at each other in confusion. Outside, another evacuation ship fought to reach orbit, its hull glowing red from atmospheric friction. Time was running out, and now they had another mystery to worry about. "Put it on the main screen," Alara ordered as they walked toward the bridge. "I want to know everything our sensors can tell us about this vessel." The massive display flickered to life, showing the unknown ship as a small dot against the starfield. It moved with steady purpose, neither slowing nor speeding up. The approaching vessel seemed to view the massive Ravager fleet as nothing more than a minor obstacle. "Size estimates?" Alara asked. "Approximately 2 kilometers in length." "Mass readings suggest heavy armor plating. I'm detecting multiple weapon systems, but the configurations are unfamiliar." Thorne studied the readouts with growing amazement. "What kind of species builds something like this?" "Unknown, sir. The design philosophy is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be purpose-built for warfare." On the screen, the mysterious ship continued its approach toward the Ravager fleet. The biomechanical monstrosities waited in formation, their hulls pulsing with absorbed energy from destroyed worlds. They had never encountered resistance that didn't immediately flee or surrender. "Try to establish communication," Alara commanded. Beck's fingers flew across his console, broadcasting on all standard frequencies. Mathematical sequences, basic pictographs, even music, nothing yet. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Outside, the evacuation continued. Its desperate race against time. Every minute brought the Ravager fleet closer to weapons range. Every second meant more lives that might not make it to safety. "Wait," Beck said suddenly. "I'm receiving a transmission. It's in mathematical format, but it's converting to galactic. Standard." The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a calm, measured voice. "Attention Kepler 438b Defense Forces. This is Captain David Stone of the United Earthship Defiance. We have monitored your distress signals and are moving to engage the hostile fleet. Recommend you continue evacuation procedures and maintain safe distance." The 3 officers stared at each other in shock. Earth? The mythical world that some scholars claimed was the origin point of several minor species? But those were just theories, legends from ancient databases that most people dismissed as fantasy. Did he say United Earthship? Thorne asked in disbelief. Running. Linguistic analysis now, Beck reported. If our computers are correct, this species calls itself humanity. Before anyone could respond, the tactical display erupted in activity. The human ship had crossed into the Ravager fleet's defensive perimeter. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of bioships began converging on the Defiance, their weapons charging with enough energy to destroy a small moon. They're going to be annihilated, Thorne whispered, but as they watched, something impossible happened. The human ship didn't slow down or attempt evasive maneuvers. It didn't even seem to acknowledge the overwhelming force moving against it. Instead, it simply opened fire. The first salvo lit up space like a newborn star. Weapons unlike anything in the galactic databases streaked toward the Ravager fleet. Beams of coherent energy carved through biomechanical hulls like hot knives through ice. Missiles guided by impossibly sophisticated targeting systems found their marks with surgical precision. In 30 seconds. The human ship destroyed 17 Ravager vessels. The Ravager fleet recoiled like a wounded animal. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered prey that could bite back. The biomechanical ships began to coordinate their response, focusing their fire on the human vessel with desperate intensity, but the Defiance was already moving, its engines pushing the massive warship through space with fluid grace. Its weapon systems cycled continuously, each shot placed with lethal accuracy. The ship fought like a creature born for war, as if its entire species had spent centuries preparing for exactly this moment. Impossible, Alara breathed. One ship. Against 300, and they're winning. On the tactical display, the human vessel carved through the Ravager fleet like an avenging angel. Its weapons spoke with voices of thunder, and wherever they pointed, the galaxy's greatest threat died screaming in the void. For the first time in months, Commander Alara felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The unknown ship continued its deadly dance among the Ravager fleet, and with each passing moment, the galaxy's darkest hour grew a little brighter. Somewhere in the depths of space, humanity had answered the call for help, and they had come to fight. The bridge of the United Earthship Defiance hummed with quiet efficiency as Captain David Stone reviewed the tactical display. His ship had been patrolling the Outer Rim territories for 6 months, following scattered reports of unusual activity in the frontier sectors. What they had discovered exceeded his worst fears. Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Shepler 438 system, reported Navigation Officer Riley from her station. Multiple species broadcasting emergency evacuation codes. Stone's jaw tightened as he studied the tactical readout. The Ravager fleet stretched across space like a cancer, hundreds of biomechanical nightmares, each the size of a small city. The sensor readings made his stomach turn. These ships were literally eating the debris from destroyed vessels, growing larger with each kill. Riley, what's our current position? Approximately 8 hours from the system at maximum speed, sir. And, the evacuation status? Ongoing, but the transports are heavily overloaded. They won't finish in time. Stone had commanded warships for 15 years, from the asteroid belt conflicts to the brutal Mars rebellion. He had seen humanity at its worst and its finest, but this was different. This was genocide on a scale that made human conflicts look like children's games. Weapons Officer Torres, what's our combat status? All systems nominal, sir. Fusion missiles loaded and ready. Particle beam arrays at full charge. The new quantum torpedoes are armed and standing by. Stone nodded slowly. The Defiance represented humanity's latest military technology, incorporating every lesson learned from 2 centuries of warfare. She was fast, heavily armed, and built with one philosophy: overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Communications. Are you monitoring any chatter from the Ravager fleet? Negative, sir. Complete radio silence. No formation signals, no coordination traffic, nothing. They might not need to communicate, Torres observed grimly. Hive mind species. Or they're so confident that coordination is unnecessary? Stone stood from his command chair, his decision crystallizing like ice in his mind. Helm, set course for the Ravager fleet. Maximum speed, sir? Riley's voice carried a note of concern. There are approximately 300 enemy vessels. We're heavily outnumbered. Lieutenant Riley, Stone's voice remained calm, almost conversational. In 6 hours, those ships are going to begin exterminating every living thing on that planet. Men, women, children, entire species that have never heard of Earth or humanity. They're going to die while we watch from a safe distance. He paused, his eyes never leaving the tactical display where the Ravager fleet continued its relentless advance. That's not acceptable. All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. The ship transformed around them as the crew prepared for combat. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red. Blast doors sealed automatically. Weapon systems came online with the distinctive whine of charging capacitors. Sir, Torres called from her station. Preliminary analysis of the Ravager fleet suggests they've been responsible for the destruction of at least 17 inhabited systems. Conservative estimates put the death toll at over 40 billion sentient beings. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Stone felt the familiar cold calm that had carried him through every major engagement of his career. The Ravagers had swept through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path. They had never encountered organized resistance. They had never faced humanity. Engineering status report. Reactor output at maximum efficiency, sir. All weapon systems fully charged. Hull integrity at 100%. Tactical analysis. The Ravager vessels appear to be biomechanical hybrids. Their hulls are organic compounds reinforced with consumed metals. Weapon systems are energy-based, designed to penetrate standard crystalline armor and energy shields. Stone smiled grimly. Standard galactic defensive systems were elegant, efficient, and completely unsuited for warfare against an enemy that adapted to every attack. Humanity had learned different lessons in the crucible of constant conflict. Torres, what do you think of their defensive capabilities? Impressive regenerative abilities, sir. But they're designed to counter energy weapons and exotic matter. Attacks? I don't think they've ever faced kinetic weapons or fusion warheads. Good. Begin target acquisition on the largest vessels. I want firing solutions for everything in that fleet. The Defiance's artificial intelligence, nicknamed Atlas, by the crew, began calculating optimal attack patterns. The AI had been trained on every major naval engagement in human history, from ancient sea battles to the latest space conflicts. It understood warfare in ways that peaceful species never could. Captain, Communications Officer West spoke up. I'm detecting evacuation signals from the planet. Multiple species requesting assistance. Broadcast a response on all frequencies. Tell them that the Earthship Defiance is moving to engage the hostile fleet. Advise them to continue evacuation procedures and maintain safe distance. Aye, sir. Stone studied the tactical display one final time. 300 Ravager vessels against one human warship. The odds were impossible by any rational calculation. Irrationality was a luxury that humanity had never been able to afford. All stations report ready for combat, sir, Torres announced. Very well. Stone settled back into his command chair, his voice carrying the authority of 2 centuries of human military tradition. Helm, take us in. Let's show these things what happens when they threaten innocent people. The Defiance surged forward, her engines roaring at maximum output. Behind her, the evacuation ships continued their desperate race against time. Ahead, the Ravager fleet waited in formation, confident in their overwhelming superiority. None of them had ever encountered a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for war. The human warship closed the distance to the enemy fleet. Captain Stone felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. This would be humanity's first contact with galactic civilization, and he intended to make it memorable. The Ravagers were about to learn that some prey had teeth. The Ravager command ship Fleshrender pulsed like a diseased heart at the center of the fleet, its biomechanical hull rippling with energy absorbed from a dozen consumed worlds. Within its neural chambers, the collective consciousness that guided The Ravagers became aware of the approaching anomaly with something that might have been curiosity, unknown configuration. Single vessel. Trajectory indicates aggressive intent. The thought rippled through the collective like electricity through water, touching every ship in the fleet simultaneously. For the first time in their conquest of this galaxy, the Ravagers encountered something that didn't immediately flee or surrender in terror. Scan the vessel. Determine species classification. Prepare standard absorption protocols. The biomechanical ships began their analysis, probing the approaching vessel with sensors that had cataloged the technology of 1,000 dead civilizations. What they found defied their understanding. Hull composition: unknown metallic alloys. Defensive systems: incompatible with standard classifications. Weapon signatures: no database matches. Meanwhile, aboard the observation deck of the Kepler 438b defense station, Commander Alara and her officers watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The human ship had crossed into the Ravager fleet's outer perimeter, and the response was immediate. "Energy spikes across the enemy fleet," Lieutenant Beck reported, his voice tight with tension. "They're powering weapon systems, all of them?" Captain Thorne asked in disbelief. "Every single ship, sir. They're treating this one vessel as a fleet-level threat." Commander Alara studied the display, trying to understand what she was seeing. The Ravager fleet was repositioning itself, forming a tactical formation that she had never seen them use before. They were taking the human ships seriously. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," Beck announced. The speakers crackled with Captain Stone's voice, calm and professional despite the overwhelming odds he faced. "Kepler 438b Defense Forces, this is Captain Stone aboard the Defiance. We are about to engage the hostile fleet. Recommend you maintain safe distance and continue evacuation procedures." "Captain Stone," Alara responded, "you're facing 300 enemy vessels. Request immediate withdrawal to safe distance." There was a brief pause before Stone's voice returned, tinged with something that might have been amusement. "Commander, we didn't come this far to run away. Besides, 300 isn't that many. We've faced worse odds." Before anyone could respond, the tactical display exploded into activity. A human ship had opened fire, and the results were unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space like miniature suns, each one carrying enough destructive power to vaporize a small asteroid. Particle beams, refined through centuries of human military research, carved through biomechanical hulls with surgical precision. Fusion missiles, guided by artificial intelligence systems that could calculate 1,000,000 trajectories per second, found their targets with devastating accuracy. The first salvo lasted exactly 30 seconds. When it ended, 17 Ravager vessels had been completely destroyed. The collective screamed. For the first time in their existence, the Ravagers felt genuine pain. The destruction of 17 ships had torn holes in their shared consciousness, leaving wounds that burned like acid through their neural networks. Impossible. Weapon systems exceed all known parameters, targeting precision beyond calculated limits. How? But even as the collective reeled from the unexpected assault, the human ship was already moving. The Defiance rolled through space with fluid grace, its engines pushing the massive warship through complex evasive maneuvers that defied its apparent size. "They're moving like a fighter," Beck whispered in amazement. "How can something that large be so maneuverable?" The Ravager fleet responded with overwhelming firepower. Energy beams capable of melting continents focused on the human vessel. Biomechanical weapons that had torn through the hulls of 1,000 ships discharged their fury. The combined assault was enough to destroy a small moon. The Defiance's shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed the incoming fire. For a moment, the human ship disappeared in a globe of incandescent energy. When the glow faded, it was still there, still moving, still fighting. "Impossible," Thorne breathed. "Nothing should be able to survive that kind of firepower." But Captain Stone's voice came through the communications channel, still calm and unruffled. "Defiance to Kepler 438b. Defense, we're reading some interesting energy signatures from these bioships. Their weapons are designed to counter crystalline armor and energy shields. Unfortunately for them, we use neither. The human ship's weapons spoke again, and more Ravager vessels died. The Defiance moved through the enemy fleet like a shark among minnows, its weapons systems cycling with mechanical precision. Each shot was placed with lethal accuracy, targeting structural weak points and command nodes. "Sir," Beck reported, his voice filled with wonder, "the human vessel is using targeting patterns I've never seen before. They're not just shooting at the ships. They're shooting at specific locations on each ship." Commander Alara studied the tactical display, beginning to understand what she was witnessing. "And they're not fighting like any species we know. Look at their movement patterns, their targeting priorities. These aren't the tactics of a peaceful civilization." The Ravager fleet was adapting, learning to coordinate their attacks against this unexpected threat. But the human ship was adapting too, changing its tactics with each passing moment. It was as if the entire vessel was designed for exactly this kind of combat. "Captain Stone," Alara transmitted, "how are you doing this?" "Your ship is outnumbered. 300 to 1. Stone's reply came back immediately. "Commander, humanity has been at war with itself for over 2,000 years. We've learned a few things about fighting during that time. These Ravagers might be tough, but they've never faced an enemy that grew up fighting itself." The truth of his words was evident in every movement of the Defiance. The ship fought with the accumulated wisdom of every naval battle in human history. It moved with the hard-won knowledge of a species that had never known peace. Another salvo from the human ship claimed 8 more Ravager vessels. The collective screams of pain and confusion echoed through the biomechanical hulls of the remaining ships. They had never encountered resistance like this. They had never faced an enemy that understood war so completely. "Sir," Beck said quietly, "I'm detecting something else. Long-range sensors are picking up additional ships approaching the system." "Ravager reinforcements?" Thorne asked. "No, sir. The energy signatures are different. Multiple species, all heading this way." Commander Alara felt her heart skip. The distress signals, other species received them too. Across the galaxy, the impossible sight of a single human ship holding the line against the Ravager fleet was inspiring something that had been lost for months: hope. Species that had fled in terror were turning around. Fleets that had scattered were reforming. The galaxy was remembering how to fight back. The battle of Kepler 438b was about to become something much larger than anyone had imagined. The neural pathways of the Ravager fleet blazed with signals that hadn't been experienced in millennia: confusion, genuine pain, and something that might have been fear. The collective had consumed entire star systems, absorbed the knowledge and technology of countless species, and never once encountered resistance that could actually hurt them. Impossible weapon systems exceed all parameters, targeting precision beyond calculated limits. How does this species understand warfare so completely? But even as the collective reeled from the unexpected assault, the human ship continued its deadly dance through their formation. Captain Stone's voice echoed through the Defiance's corridors as his crew worked with the precision of a machine designed for one purpose: war. "Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7. Weapons, continue targeting the command vessels. Torres, damage report. Hull integrity at 96%, sir. Their bioweapons are barely scratching our armor. These energy beams are designed to penetrate crystalline hulls and energy shields. They're not effective against our titanium ceramic composite armor." Stone allowed himself a grim smile. The Ravager's weapons were sophisticated and devastating, but they had been designed to counter the defensive systems used by peaceful galactic civilizations. They had never encountered the layered defense systems that humanity had developed through centuries of warfare with their own kind. "Sir," Navigation Officer Riley called from her station, "the enemy fleet is beginning to reposition." "They're trying to surround us. Let them try," Stone replied calmly. "Torres, initiate firing pattern Omega. I want every weapon system cycling continuously. Show them what humanity learned from the siege of Europa." The Defiance became a nexus of destruction, her weapon systems operating in perfect harmony. The ship's artificial intelligence, Atlas, calculated optimal firing solutions, faster than any organic mind could process. Each shot was placed with lethal precision, targeting structural weak points, power conduits, and command centers. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space like fallen stars, each one carrying enough destructive power to crack a moon particle. Beams refined through 2 centuries of human military research, carved through biomechanical hulls with surgical accuracy. Fusion missiles, guided by targeting systems that had learned from every naval engagement in human history, found their marks with devastating effectiveness. On the observation deck of the Kepler 438b defense station, Commander Alara and her officers watched in amazement as the human ship carved through the Ravager fleet like an avenging angel. The tactical display showed numbers that should have been impossible, 1 ship against 300, and the humans were winning. "How are they doing this?" Lieutenant Beck whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Commander Alara found herself thinking of her academy courses on military history and strategy. "They're not just fighting the Ravagers," she said slowly, understanding dawning in her mind. "They're fighting them with the accumulated experience of fighting themselves. Look at their movement patterns, their targeting priorities. These aren't the tactics of a species that has known peace." Captain Thorne nodded grimly. "Whatever this humanity is, they've spent their entire existence preparing for war. Every maneuver, every weapon, every tactical decision shows the experience of a species that has never stopped fighting." As if to prove his point, the Defiance's latest salvo struck the command ship Flesh Render directly. The massive bio-vessel shuddered as quantum torpedoes penetrated its hull, and for the first time in the Ravager Collective's existence, the central consciousness felt genuine agony. Impossible. No single vessel should possess such firepower. No species should understand warfare at this level. What manner of civilization produces such weapons? But the collective was learning, adapting as it always had. The surviving ships began to coordinate their attacks with desperate intensity, focusing their fire on the human vessel with the coordination of a species that had never known defeat. The Defiance's shields flared under the concentrated assault, and Captain Stone felt his ship shudder beneath the overwhelming firepower. Damage report. Shield generators at 60% and dropping. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. Engineering reports power fluctuations in the primary reactor. Stone's eyes never left the tactical display. They had hurt the Ravagers badly, destroying nearly a third of their fleet, but the remaining ships were still massive in number and growing more coordinated by the minute. "All hands prepare for emergency maneuvers," he announced calmly. "If we're going down, we're taking as many of these monsters with us as possible." But even as the Defiance prepared for what might be its final assault, something was happening throughout the galaxy. The distress signals from Kepler 438b had been received by more than just the local defense stations. They had been heard by other ships, other species, other worlds that had cowered in the face of the Ravager advance, and now, as they watched the impossible sight of a single human ship holding the line against the galaxy's greatest threat, they began to remember what it meant to fight back. "Sir," Beck announced suddenly, "I'm detecting multiple ship signatures entering the system. Multiple species, all heading this way." The tactical display updated, showing dozens of new contacts approaching at maximum speed. Centauri Defense Force vessels, their hulls gleaming with battle damage from previous encounters. Rigelian fighters, small and fast, moving in perfect formation. Even the massive bulk carriers of the Andorian merchant fleet, their cargo holds, now filled with weapons instead of trade goods. "Commander," a new voice crackled through the communications system. "This is Admiral Corvin of the Third Fleet. We received your distress signal and the transmission from the human vessel. We're moving to support." More voices joined the channel. Captains from a dozen different species all reporting their arrival in the system. Ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace, their crews ready to fight for the first time in months. "Captain Stone," Commander Alara transmitted, "you have reinforcements arriving." Multiple fleets converging on your position. Stone's reply came back immediately, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Outstanding, Commander. Tell them to form up on our position. It's time to show these Ravagers what happens when the Galaxy fights back. The Defiance continued its deadly assault, but now it was no longer alone. The human ship's example had inspired something that the Ravagers had tried to destroy: unity in the face of overwhelming evil. Species that had fled in terror were returning to fight. Fleets that had scattered were reforming into a force that could challenge the invaders. Sir, Torres reported, the enemy fleet is beginning to show signs of confusion. Their coordination is breaking down. Stone smiled grimly. The collective is learning what every military commander in human history has discovered. It's one thing to fight scattered, terrified enemies. It's another thing entirely to face a united force that refuses to surrender. The Battle of Kepler 438b was transforming from a desperate last stand into something far more significant. As ship after ship arrived to join the human vessel, the Ravager fleet found itself facing not just superior firepower, but something they had never encountered: a galaxy that had found its courage. The tide was turning, and for the first time in their existence, the Ravagers began to understand what it meant to be afraid. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 438b, Commander Alara stood on the same observation deck where she had watched her world's near destruction. But now, instead of evacuation ships fleeing in terror, she saw something that would have been impossible to imagine: construction vessels rebuilding the orbital defense platforms. While sleek human warships patrolled the system in formation with vessels from dozens of different species, the battle had lasted 18 hours and changed the galaxy forever. The Defiance had been joined by the remnants of the Third Fleet, then by ships from the Centauri Defense Force, and finally by vessels from every species that had ever fled before the Ravager advance. Together, they had accomplished what no single world had managed. They had destroyed the entire Ravager fleet. The final casualty reports, Commander, Lieutenant Beck said, approaching with a data tablet. His voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before the battle. Alara took the tablet, scanning the numbers with the practiced eye of someone who had seen too much death. The Ravager fleet had been completely destroyed, every biomechanical ship reduced to drifting debris. But the victory had come at a cost that would be remembered for generations. 47 Allied vessels lost, she read aloud, including the Defiance. Captain Stone had gone down with his ship, ramming the command ship Fleshrender at full speed in a final act of defiance that had shattered the collective's neural core. His last transmission, broadcast on all frequencies as his ship made its death run, had become the rallying cry for a new age of galactic cooperation. The memorial service? Alara asked. Tomorrow at 0800 hours. Representatives from every species that participated in the battle will be attending. The human delegation is sending a full honor guard from Earth itself. Alara nodded. In the months since the battle, humanity had emerged from the shadows of galactic civilization, revealing a species that had spent centuries preparing for exactly this kind of conflict. Their ships were marvels of military engineering. Their tactics were sophisticated beyond anything the galaxy had previously seen, and their commitment to protecting others had impressed even the most cynical observers. But it wasn't just their military might that had changed everything. Captain Stone's final words, transmitted as the Defiance made its ultimate sacrifice, had ignited something that the Ravagers had tried to extinguish: hope. This is Captain David Stone of the United Earthship Defiance. To anyone who receives this message, we are humanity, and we do not abandon our friends. We do not flee from bullies. We do not bow to tyrants. Today we stand together, and today we fight back. The transmission had been heard across the galaxy, inspiring species that had known only defeat to believe in victory once again. Worlds that had prepared for extinction began to rebuild. Fleets that had scattered in terror reformed into defensive forces. The galaxy had remembered how to fight for what was right. Commander, Beck said quietly, there's something else. The Galactic Council wants to know if you'll accept command of the new Joint Task Force. Alara looked out at the ships patrolling her system. Human vessels worked alongside Centauri cruisers, Regalian fighters, and dozens of other designs she was still learning to identify. After centuries of isolation and fear, the galaxy was finally working together as one unified force. "What's the mission?" she asked. "Exploration and defense. The humans believe there may be other threats out there, other species like the Ravagers. They want to be ready for whatever comes next." Beck paused, his expression growing serious. "They want to make sure this never happens again." Commander Alara thought of Captain Stone and his crew, of the courage that had saved not just her world but the entire galaxy. She thought of the children who would grow up free because a single human ship had refused to run when faced with impossible. "Odds? Tell the Council yes," she said. "And Lieutenant, make sure the task force motto is prominently displayed on every ship in the fleet." Beck smiled. "What motto is that, Commander?" Alara looked out at the stars, where somewhere in the vast darkness, other worlds might be crying out for help. Other species might be facing their own impossible odds, waiting for someone to stand up and fight. "Never again," she said simply. "Never again." The Joint Task Force had grown to include over 300 vessels from 47 different species. Each ship carried the same message that Captain Stone had delivered in humanity's first contact with galactic civilization, that there were some things worth fighting for, some evils that could not be tolerated, and some battles that had to be won regardless of the cost. The humans had shared their military technology freely, teaching other species the lessons they had learned through centuries of warfare. But more importantly, they had shared their philosophy that the strong had a responsibility to protect the weak, and that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be ready for war. As the twin suns of Kepler 438b set behind the orbital platforms, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, the galaxy settled into what historians would later call the Long Peace. The Ravagers were gone, their threat ended by the courage of one human captain and the united forces of 100 worlds. But the peace was not passive. Throughout the galaxy, the Joint Task Force patrolled constantly, ready to respond to any threat that might emerge. New worlds were explored with caution. Strange signals were investigated immediately. The galaxy had learned that vigilance was the price of freedom. "Commander," Beck said, pointing to the tactical display, "we're receiving a transmission from the exploration fleet. They found something interesting in the Vega system." "Define interesting," Alara replied, though she was already moving toward the communications console. "Ruins of an ancient civilization, but not just any ruins. The preliminary scan suggests they might have fought the Ravagers thousands of years ago and won." Alara felt her pulse quicken. If there were other species that had successfully resisted the Ravagers, their knowledge could be invaluable for future threats. "Prep a diplomatic mission. Full escort, mixed species crew. I want to know everything about these ruins." As the orders went out and ships began to move, Alara reflected on how much had changed. 6 months ago, the galaxy had been a collection of isolated worlds, each one waiting in terror for the Ravagers to arrive. Now it was a unified civilization, ready to face whatever challenges might come. The age of cowering in the shadows was over, the age of standing together had begun. And somewhere in the depths of space, where new threats might one day emerge, the combined fleets of 100 worlds patrolled endlessly, carrying Captain Stone's message to the stars. "We are humanity, and we do not abandon our friends." The words had become more than just a battle cry. They had become the foundation of a new galactic civilization, one built on the simple principle that no world should face extinction alone. In the command center of the Joint Task Force flagship, a massive vessel constructed with technology from dozens of species, Admiral Alara reviewed the daily reports. Trade routes that had been abandoned for months were reopening. Colonial expeditions were venturing into previously unexplored sectors. The galaxy was growing again, expanding outward with the confidence that came from knowing that help would always come when needed. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we've received confirmation from the exploration team at Vega, the ruins contain detailed records of an ancient war against the Ravagers. They're requesting additional archaeological support. Approved. Send the full research fleet. Alara paused, considering the implications, and include a human contingent. Their military historians might be able to interpret battle records. We miss. The discovery at Vega had proven that the Ravagers were not invincible, that other species had found ways to defeat them in ages past. Each piece of information brought them closer to understanding the true nature of the threat they had faced and how to prepare for whatever might come next. As night fell over Kepler 438b, the lights of the rebuilt cities twinkled like stars. On the planet's surface, children who had been evacuated in terror 6 months ago were now playing in parks that had been rebuilt with materials donated by worlds they had never heard of. The galaxy had become a family, united by the memory of how close they had come to losing everything. In orbit above, the combined fleet maintained its eternal vigil. Human ships sailed alongside vessels from civilizations that had never met before the crisis. Former enemies worked side by side, united by the knowledge that their survival depended on their willingness to stand together. The Ravagers were gone, but their legacy lived on in the unity they had inadvertently created. The galaxy had learned that its strength lay not in individual worlds or species, but in the bonds between them. And those bonds had been forged in the fire of humanity's first gift to galactic civilization, the knowledge that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Captain David Stone and the crew of the Defiance had given their lives to save a world they had never seen, to protect people they had never met. Their sacrifice had become the cornerstone of a new age, one where the strong protected the weak. And no one faced the darkness alone. The long peace had begun, and it would endure for as long as beings remembered the lesson of Kepler 438b, that sometimes, when faced with overwhelming evil, the only choice is to stand up and fight back, together.